हर हर भोले महादेव, हर हर भोले महादेव, हर हर भोले महादेव, हर हर भोले महादेव, हर हर भोले महादेव। शंकर महादेव, शंभो शंकर महादेव, शंभो शंकर महादेव, शंभो शंकर महादेव, भोले बाबा महादेव, शंकर बाबा महादेव, महादेव भोले बाबा महादेव शंकर बाबा महादेव भोले बाबा महादेव शंकर बाबा महादेव भोले बाबा महादेव शंकर बाबा महादेव। विठ्ठला हरी विठ्ठला 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 हरी विठ्ठला विठ्ठला हरी पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला हरी विठ्ठला 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 पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला हरि नारायण भज हरि नारायण भज हरि नारायण भज हरि नारायण हरि नारायण हरि नारायण हरि नारायण हरि नारायण पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पुरंदर विठ्ठला पांडुरंग विठ्ठला राधा रमन हरि गोविंद जय जय गोविंद राधा रमन हरि गोविंद जय जय गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय हरे राम 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 विठ्ठला हरे विठ्ठला विठ्ठला हरे विठ्ठला ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः.
Welcome to satsang. I'll start as always with one of our questions that has come in advance and then open it up to any question that anyone here may have. I have never been a religious person, never involved in family religious activities. Over my last 6 days here, I have felt a change. How do I become a spiritual person connected to my religion? It's a tragedy to me these days that there's such a chasm between what we consider religion and what we consider spirituality. And this sense of, well, I've never been religious. Now I've had these experiences. How do I connect my spirituality to my religion? How do I go back and live this? Religion, at its core, is actually supposed to connect us to God. That's what it's for. Religion is not supposed to be this dogma that confines us and constricts us and suffocates us and keeps us in walls and keeps us separate from other people. Religion is supposed to be the way to know God. And tragically, though, religion has been so co-opted politically in so many cases. Religion has been so stuck in old cultural norms. So when you look at people who tend to be very religious, what you see also is a staticness stagnation of cultural growth. It's people who say things like, no, it must be like this because it's always been like that. And who, in the name of religion, are holding on to social norms, cultural norms, societal norms of decades and hundreds of years ago. And so it's no surprise that a lot of people say, oh, not so interested in religion. Spirituality, great. I want to find peace. I want to connect to spirit. I want to know my inner self, my consciousness, but not so interested in the dogma, not so interested in being told you're wrong all the time. These days, we get up, we go to the office, our boss tells us we're wrong, our colleagues tell us we're wrong, we come home, our parents tell us we're wrong, our spouses tell us we're wrong, our children tell us we're wrong. The last thing people want is to go to temple or church, mandir, wherever we go is our spiritual place, and also feel like God is saying you're wrong. And so, but people know that they need some kind of a connection. And so this is where spirituality has come in as sort of religion without the baggage. You don't want dogma, no problem. You don't want to be stuck in societal norms of 100 years ago. You don't want to be told you're wrong. No problem. Just be spiritual, don't be religious. And spirituality is so fluid in what it can mean that you almost can convince yourself of anything in the name of spirituality. I can't tell you how many people have spoken to me of great promiscuity, what I would consider really reckless sexual lives, but they rationalize it in the name of, spiritual exploration, or they'll call it tantra without even having any idea what tantra actually means or the context that tantra comes in. This is people in the West. Now that I've moved to India, they say, oh yeah, I'm on this path, and to me it looks like a path of rampant promiscuity, but it gets justified in the name of spirituality. Almost everything we want to do can be justified in some way by this very fluid, bendy teaching concept of spirituality. And this is why I'm a very staunch advocate, actually, for bringing back religion. There isn't actually anything inherently wrong with religion. Religion does not need to allow itself to be co-opted for political aims. Religion does not have to be stale and static. Religion doesn't have to be dogma that constricts us. And so I would love for religious people to actually be able to look beyond the dogma, to look beyond the walls, to look beyond the separation, and to become living examples of spirituality in religion. Because what spirituality means is of the spirit, connected to spirit. And that's what religion is. It's what's connecting you to the divine, to that divine within yourself, to the divine outside, to the divine in others. Whether you look at mantras and teachings given to us in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and all of our scriptures, whether you look at the teachings given in the Bible by Jesus Christ, whatever scripture we're looking in, the teachings are telling us the world is divine. I have created the world. Whether we say Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam, Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat, the universe is pervaded by the divine. Whether we listen to Jesus Christ say, love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, you can't actually love every neighbor. You know, and the teaching doesn't say love your next door neighbor, love the guy 2 doors down, love everyone on your block. There's no specific distinction, which means to me that it's a very, very broad and expansive definition of neighbor. Well, how can you possibly love every one of your neighbors? You can't even know every one of your neighbors. The only way to understand, for me, a teaching like that is love God and realize that God exists in all your neighbors. It's the only way in common sense that I can understand that. Otherwise, well, my neighbors keep changing, right? I mean, the guy moved out, some new guy moved in. Do I have to love him immediately? Or is there, a 7-day grace period? We're not given any of this information. Just love thy neighbor as thyself, which to me means literally nothing other than, it can't mean anything other than, love God and realize, whether you've ever met the neighbor before or not, that in that neighbor is God, and therefore you will love them. And as thyself. Well, so again, this is the teachings from same teachings from our Hindu scriptures. They are yourself. You can't love them as yourself unless you realize they are yourself. Otherwise, really, you're going to love hundreds of people as much as you love yourself. So it requires a degree of self-effacement in the experience of, in the face of everyone else, that I'm really going to love you as much as I love myself. Well, it means I need to focus a lot more on loving you than on me. It requires a very high degree of mastery. The only way to do it, for the common person for whom all of these scriptures are written, they're not written just for monks and monastics and sannyasis. Scriptures are given to us for everyone. So for the common person, someone who doesn't dedicate 24 hours a day to spiritual practice and live as a renunciant, the only way to do it is to realize your neighbor is yourself. You are one with that person. It's the only way, without your 7-day grace period or a year grace period, or even when, their dog barks too much, or they're having a party that's too loud, too late at night, and it's disturbing you. Well, how do you love them then? Only when you realize they are you. And so the teachings within our religions, and again, it doesn't matter what religion we take, what holy scripture we take, the teachings are the teachings of spirituality when we take them at their core. And so you've never been a religious person, no problem. Now, as the question said, you've come here, everything has changed. How to go back and bring that in? Well, it's wonderful. Realize that your religion is so beautiful. Realize that your religion is the teaching of love, of oneness, of truth, of consciousness, of seeing the self in the other. And live that. And there's so many different beautiful aspects of the religion to take. So, okay, maybe you can't necessarily take them all at once. Take one a week. Take one tenet a week, one teaching a week. Implement it, live it. But we need to take back religion. Just because a handful of people have given religion a bad name Doesn't mean that the rest of us should be prepared to let it go and throw it away and say, well, okay, no problem, I'll just be spiritual instead. We need to take back religion and say, no, what those people are doing is not religion. Here's what religion is. And yeah, I'm religious, but I'm not that. And not to have to say, well, I'm not religious because that's what religion looks like. They've made religion look like that. And now I'm just this amorphous sort of spirituality. Because the thing with religion is, it gives us also values and ethics. What in Hinduism we call sanskaras. And spirituality, as I began with, can sometimes be kind of a self-rationalizing free-for-all. I mean, when there's absolutely no dogma, when there's not even a dharma, you can pretty much justify anything. And I've heard, I don't want to say I've heard it all. I've heard almost all of it. Stealing? Well, everything's mine, right? There's no distinction. No place I end and that guy begins. His stuff is mine. I mean, you really can, when there's not a dharma, when there's not any structure and you get to just pick and choose sort of a line from this one and a line from that one and a line from this and a story from here, you get to create a life that enables you to pretty much live however you want and give yourself a stamp of approval that says spiritual. And I think we need to hold ourselves up to a higher image, a higher ideal. And so let us take back religion, realizing it is spirituality. And live the two as one. Live the spirituality through religion. And live our religion as spirituality. But having a dharma is very important for life. Doesn't matter which one it is. But having a dharma with values and ethics is very, very important. So before I take any of our other questions that have come in advance, I'm happy to open it up to any questions that anyone here might have. Yes.
Yeah, this is a question from 3 questions from yesterday.
Okay.
About addiction, discernment, and destiny.
Yes.
You spoke of third eye chakra, opening that to be discerning, and acknowledging that we control our destiny, what we do with the cow.
Yes.
And so I guess the question is how to develop and practice discernment with the power of choice and destiny in dealing with the addictions, both gross and subtle.
Wonderful. So the power of discrimination, discernment, and addiction. But it has to begin, if you're going to begin with it as a spiritual practice. See, if you just try to walk into addiction and think about discrimination and discernment, it's going to be very, very difficult. I don't want to say you're going to fail, because if you've got some wonderful showering of grace, some great power of the Guru, great power of divine connection, anything is possible. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult in the same way that finding the inner voice through meditation in a time of chaos, when you've never meditated before and you have no idea what that inner voice sounds like, is very difficult. Which is why we always suggest beginning a practice of meditation before you're in a time of chaos. Not the disaster management model of spiritual practice, Because otherwise, in that moment of chaos, when you close your eyes, you can't discern what is really my inner divine voice. What's the voice of ego? What's the voice of fear? What's the voice of the culture? And in the same way, if I were wanting to use that for addiction, I wouldn't start with the addiction. Then the addiction gets scared. Oh, I'm about to be discerned away. And you don't yet have a strong enough power of that yet. What you do is you begin with the power of discernment in your spiritual practice. And so this is when we meditate, for example, when we spoke about opening the third eye and the power of discrimination, of knowing truth from falsehood. So there are great meditative practices of really knowing truth from untruth. Who am I? Right? So you begin perhaps with the practice of neti neti. You sit to meditate, I'm not my sari, I'm not my clothes. Okay, that's obvious, we all know that. I'm not my skin. I'm not the blood that runs under my skin. I'm not the muscles. I'm not the capillaries and the tissues, and you go through all the different parts of the body. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this. Ultimately, I'm not the organs. I'm not my kidneys, I'm not my liver. And again, we know all of this because our skin sloughs off and gets regenerated. You're still there. Get a blood transfusion, donate blood, no breaking in a sense of self. Get a liver transplant, get a kidney transplant, get dialysis. No sense at all of I've lost myself, hey wait. So we know we're not any of those things. And then you take a little bit more subtle. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my emotions. And we know that we're not those because they keep changing. And again, I'm not losing my sense of self in between them. If I am my thoughts, then in that rare but very precious space between my thoughts, I would cease to exist. And if I ceased to exist, then who would be there to think the next thought? So I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my emotions. I'm not my history. I'm not any of those things. And it's a great meditative practice to just begin this power of discrimination. Piece by piece by piece. Who am I? Another way to do it as well, you could do it in meditation, although it's a little bit more analytical. So I would consider it more of an introspection or a contemplation. Is we all have certain truths that we hold in our life. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not good. So sometimes, for example, a truth may be, I am really smart. I'm the smartest guy in the class. I know everything. Flip side may also be a truth we hold. I am the stupidest one. I don't know anything. I can't do anything. I'm a total failure. Okay. Both thoughts we hold. Neither of them is true. And you can begin a practice in contemplation of simply saying, you could take it from a lot of ways. What makes me think I don't know this? What makes me think I'm stupid? If I weren't stupid, how would my life have to change? If I let go of that belief, how would my life have to change? And you start really examining how we hold our beliefs. How long have I held that? Why do I hold this belief? How do I even know it's true? On what basis am I holding this belief as true? What sort of external verification other than my own self-perpetuating cycles do I even have that this is true? you may not ever come to an exact answer. It's not about finding an answer. It's about developing a process of examining what we think. Every time an emotion arises, I got angry. Well, ask yourself later, who was that got angry? I am not angry. Because if I were angry, I would still be angry now. I would have been angry a week ago and I wasn't. Who got angry? What these questions do is they create a distance between you and that which you are examining. So whether I'm examining my thoughts, or I'm examining my emotions, or I'm examining my identity, I have created this separation so that I know I'm not that identity. I'm the watcher of that. I'm the examiner of that. And it begins a process of discernment. Who is really the I then? What is it that's constant? Whether I'm angry, there is anger. Whether there is joy, there is frustration, there is sadness. What is it that's constant amongst all of those times? Who's the I? Who's the I that has been there throughout my life? Even as my body keeps changing. Ask yourself that. And then you take it into the world. And so when we talk about the third eye being the eye that sees the truth, this energy center of the power of discrimination. So you look at someone and the mind says, man. Well, the third eye says soul, spirit. Man, as in this particular intersection of time and space, like a wave in the ocean. But actually that wave is ocean. There's no such thing as just that wave. You cannot freeze it and hold it in time and space. It's a moment. An intersection of time and space. And then it's over. Well, that can't be reality and truth. What's the reality of the wave? The truth of the wave? That it's ocean. And so these eyes look and say wave. This eye looks and says ocean. So man, soul. Consciousness, spirit. And you use that, start with that. Develop a habit of that as you move through the world. And then, when the addiction is there, so the mind says, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it, gotta have it. Need it, need it, need it, need it, need it. But you've developed now this process that says, not me. That's a thought. I'm not my thoughts. I actually can sit here and not act on it. I have a choice. And it creates that separation between you and the addiction, in the same way that it has created the space between you and the emotion. Another important aspect of that is we tend to identify as our addictions. I am an alcoholic. I am a drug addict. I am anorexic. I am a gambler. I am whatever I may be. Well, once you've developed this power of discrimination, you realize, no, I'm not. I am not an alcoholic or a drug addict. This particular karmic package I came in has got a couple of threads that have woven together over here into a little karmic knot that we're going to call addiction. But that's not who I am. And if you can see the addiction without identifying with the addiction, I do realize this comes up with some of what we talk in the 12-step programs. But I'm a very deep believer in the importance of realizing you are not the addict. There is an addiction at this moment, at this intersection of time and space, at this interweaving of threads, but you are not the addiction. You are not the addict. You are the one in whose tapestry these threads have woven together into this little knot over here. But it's not you. It's not the tapestry. And to realize that, to realize there is a choice. Because one of the difficulties with this identity as the addict is, well, if I stop drinking, then who am I? One of the issues with addictions is it's all we think about. So whether we're thinking about drinking, or we're thinking about not drinking, we're thinking about using drugs, we're thinking about not using drugs, I'm still thinking about drugs. I mean, even if all I'm doing with my brain is saying, not going to use drugs today, not going to use drugs today, not going to use drugs today. Well, my brain is still full of drugs. My body is much better off. Haven't used the drugs. But my identity is still drug addict. What do you think about? Drugs. Whether I'm using or not using, what do you think about? Drugs. Drinking or not drinking, what are you thinking about? Alcohol. And the fear becomes, well, who am I without that? This is what I've thought about for years. This is how I've lived. It's how I've planned my days. It's how I've decided who my friends are. It's how I've decided what I'm going to do. Who am I? What am I going to think about if I'm not thinking about using or not using or drinking or not drinking? And this is where it's so important to realize that that isn't you. So you're not losing the true identity of who you are. The identity that you're losing is a false identity anyway. It's a role you played for a certain period of time in a certain act of your karmic drama. Act 1, you're the addict. Act 2, you're not the addict. You don't have to walk into Act 2 of your life and play the same role you played in Act 1. Assuming you can realize in Act 1 that it was just a role. Not really who you are. That you are the wearer of the costumes. You don't want to play that costume anymore? Throw it off. And I don't mean it's easy by any means. I don't mean it's simple by any means. But it's absolutely doable, and it's essential to realize you are not the addict. Otherwise, even if we are clean, we move through the world knowing I'm still an addict, I'm still an alcoholic, I'm just not using. But there's still that identity. And ultimately the goal of this power of discrimination is to realize that isn't you. Who you are is consciousness. And so the more time that you can spend meditating, doing yoga, in spiritual places, reading spiritual things, whatever it may be, in which you are identifying with a true you, rather than a user or a non-user, it gets you into the habit of knowing who you really are. And even if you use again, then it's an action that happened, but not an identity. And then you come back. In the same way that when we're meditating, mind wanders, we bring it back. Mind wanders again, I bring it back. It's not that my mind wanders and so then I jump onto that thought and go with it wherever it wants to go. The minute I realize my mind has wandered in meditation, I bring it back. I don't say, oh wow, that's a fun thought, look at that. Yeah, London is nice this time of year. And then decide, oh I know, all right, well let's just, walk into Harrods, right? All right, I'll go there. That's not meditation. The minute you realize your mind has landed in London, you bring it back. You don't berate it, you don't scold it, you don't analyze it, you just bring it back. And in the same way, with the addiction, now it's obviously much more insidious than simply a wandering mind. But the issue with identification is the same. I no more should identify as the one who used or drank than I identify as the one who has landed in London in my mind. The technique is the same. Bring it back. That's not me. Okay. So I didn't use the tools that I have, get the help I needed, do all of the things that I'm supposed to be doing so that I'm not drinking or using. Because as I said yesterday or the day before, you cannot, I don't think, certainly not easily, simply think yourself out of addiction. Requires frequently some assistance, frequently a lot of assistance. But it's doable. And if along the way you slip, well, you just get back up. You just bring the attention back, bring the awareness back. That's not me. And that'll slowly, slowly, slowly give you enough distance from the addiction and enough connection with the truth of who you are that eventually with help, with using the tools, you get free of it. Doesn't matter, fortunately, it doesn't matter how many times you've eaten the manure and spilled the milk in your farm and how many seasons have gone by that you've been sick and your crops have died. That cow is going to keep giving it to you, and you get another chance every day. White stuff comes out every day. Brown stuff comes out every day. And every day you get to decide, well, all right, yesterday I ate the brown stuff, got sick, dumped the milk in the field, it died. I'm going to do it differently today. What I did yesterday didn't work. I'm going to do something different today. Any other questions?
As per
Yeah.
some karmic we have brought to our DNA in genetics, and through genetics some karmic we have developed in our ages. Like I am 47 years old. So these karmics which I have inbuilt from my previous birth or in this birth, can you tell me the process through which I can make myself more clean to be less like a divine father?
I'm not sure I understand the question, so let's take it piece by piece because I want to make sure we really get to the core of it. So yes, our genetics are determined by karma because our genetics come to us from our parents. And our karma is determining what womb we're taking birth in, what family we're taking birth in. So yes, our karma is determining our genetics. And then what?
The karma which have developed work in the present life. What will the process through which I can clean myself?
To clean yourself of the karma. So the Bhagavad Gita gives a beautiful teaching of this because we speak frequently colloquially about sort of a karmic bank account, and you think about good karma and bad karma, and a lot of people think, well, okay, so I cheated on my taxes, but I gave a really nice donation in the mandir, and so that should kind of cancel each other out. Like I should be okay, right? Karma doesn't actually work like that. The karma for cheating on your taxes, you're going to get the fruits of that. Those will likely be bitter fruits, what we would call bad karma. Giving dawn, giving charity is going to give you what we would consider good karma, sweet fruit. But they don't cancel each other out. It's not like an actual bank account where you've got a debit of 10 rupees and you put in 15 rupees, now you have a plus of 5 rupees. It's not like that. And so, in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is saying to Krishna, forget it, I'm not going to stand up and fight, because if I stand up and fight, I'm going to get bad karma for doing this. How can you put me in a battlefield and say, kill them? I'm just going to have to reap this horrible bad karma. Come back and get it. And instead, I want to go off into the jungles and I'm going to meditate, and I refuse to take this bad karma. And so Lord Krishna says basically, not so fast. To not do your duty, to not do your dharma, is just as much an action as anything. You're still going to get the fruits of your inaction. If somebody falls down on the road in front of you and you don't help them up, that inaction is an action. It's not just if you help them up you get good points and if you don't you're neutral. No. To be able to help the guy up and not to do it, that's an action. And that has its fruits. And so as the conversation in the Gita goes on, and Arjuna understands all of this about karma eventually, so he says to Lord Krishna, well, so then what's the answer? If my good karmas, giving me good results, also are going to sit in this karmic bank account, and if I have to keep coming back in this cycle of birth and death in order to clear my whole karmic account, the bitter stuff and the sweet stuff, then what's the answer? How do you finally clear it? If doing bad things gets me bitter, in the negative, doing good things gets me in the plus, but they're separate, they don't counterbalance each other, what do? Forget it, I'm just not going to act at all then. And then Lord Krishna says, no, because that also is an action. So he says, then what's the answer? And this is where Lord Krishna's teaching is so beautiful, and he says the only way to break free of this cycle is to offer whatever you do to me. Whatever you do it as a tool in my hands. And that's what breaks us. And so it's not about what the action is. It's about what, as a tool in God's hands, you are being told to do. Arjuna didn't want to fight that battle. In every objective level that we hold, every one of our regular ethics and virtues and yamas and niyamas, right? Violence, bad. Killing, worse. Killing your family, the worst. Arjuna didn't want to do it. And what Lord Krishna explained is, the only way for you to break free of this cycle, the only way to actually be free, is to realize you're just a tool in my hands. I am saying fight this battle. I am saying stand up. No, you don't get to run off to the forest. No, you don't get to just sit and meditate. Yeah, I know it would be a lot nicer. Sorry, that's not your dharma. Be a tool. be an instrument in my hands. And this is the only way. We become an instrument. And so if we have a connection with the divine, in which we actually have that experience of knowing what God wants us to do, fantastic. This is why we always say, make God your charioteer, right? This is where Arjuna was so blessed. If Lord Krishna were not standing in his chariot, maybe he wouldn't know what to do. Maybe he would have left it in the middle of the battle and said, forget it. If, like Duryodhana, he had chosen Krishna's army instead of Krishna personally, maybe he would have made that mistake. But he didn't. So he actually has Lord Krishna standing in his chariot telling him what to do. So if we're not that lucky, if you're not that lucky, that you've got a form of the divine you can hear, you can feel, you know is there, telling you what to do, then what do? Well, this is one of the beautiful aspects of having a guru. The guru tells us, do this. And we follow. Or we fight the way that Arjuna fought Krishna. But eventually, if we are blessed enough to have the little bit of intelligence that says, this is my guru, I really should follow, we do. If we're able to push our egos aside enough, we do. And if you're not yet blessed enough to have that, what to do? Well, that divine voice also exists within. The issue is that we have to be quiet enough to hear it. And the dilemma, of course, becomes that we have all of these other inner voices also. The ego speaks from within. Desires speak from within. Fear speaks from within. The voices that we've internalized of our culture saying, do this, do that. The voices of our parents, of our teachers, of our friends, of our neighbors, of our society. We internalize them. Once someone's been an important enough part of your life for a couple of years, their voice becomes yours. You start to hear their voice in your mind without even realizing, oh, this is that person's voice. So that also becomes an inner voice. And this is where meditation helps you slowly, slowly, slowly start to tease apart. What's the voice of my ego? What's the voice of my fear? What's the voice of my desire? What's the voice of me running away, like Arjuna saying, no? And Lord Krishna saying, yes? What's that? Which of the voices in me is that one? And this is where we meditate, to go within and hear that voice and get still enough to hear that voice. So it'll come. And we follow, and there's beautiful universal ways also that we're told. So for example, we have universal aspects of Dharma and of teachings that have been given to us by the saints and the sages and the scriptures for thousands of years. Oh, you want to be free? Okay, here's what you do. You do sadhana. You meditate, you chant God's name. You do seva. You serve and serve and serve and serve. You use your life in service. I mean, this is the universal, doesn't matter who you are, what situation you're in, universally applicable teachings given to us by all of the sages, all of the commentators, all of the scriptures. We worship God by any name, any form, it doesn't matter, but we connect with God. We make every minute and every moment puja and prayer. So whatever you're doing, are you stuck in traffic? Are you stuffing envelopes? Are you designing a website? Are you teaching basketball? Are you washing dishes? Are you washing somebody else's dishes? Are you running a company? Doesn't matter what you're doing, how high or how low it may seem to be. That needs to be your puja. That needs to be your prayer. These are not my teachings. These are just me crystallizing quickly and colloquially the core tenets that are given to us by thousands of years of saints, of sages, and all of the different scriptures in so many different ways of how do I become free of my karma? How do I attain enlightenment? How do I live my dharma on earth? So that's the general aspect. So if you don't have that deep connection with God yet to feel like he's literally or she's literally driving your chariot, and you don't have a guru to tell you what to do, at least you can begin with those, because we know those are all universally applicable. And slowly, 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 it starts to happen. It's all about surrender. It's all about just whatever you do, surrender it. Surrender it to me. It's the only way. He's made it very clear. Doesn't matter whatever else you do. If you want sweet fruit, do good karma. You want bitter fruit, do bad karma. You want to be free of all of it, surrender it all to me. And last point, you mentioned about genetics, and while yes, our karma determines our genetics do not determine our destiny. And that's very important to realize, because even though that wasn't how you asked the question, I got the feeling as you prefaced the question that your sense was somehow, my karma has determined my genetics, and my genetics on some level has determined this current state. I'm 47 and here I am and this is my life. Okay, well, so our genetics, yes, come by karma because they come by our parents. But genetics don't determine your destiny. There's tons of exciting scientific research. I mean, we've done the spiritual side. So I've told you what Lord Krishna said. I've told you what all the scriptures say and the sages and the saints say. The scientists today say, these genes, they're just possibilities and probabilities. They're not definites. There's a whole body of research out there called epigenetics, which is the study of the environment, because what they have found, and I won't go into too much of this, but I do love it. It's very exciting. What they have found is that which determines whether a gene actually gets expressed or not is not the gene itself. Something needs to turn that gene on. And what they found turns that gene on is the environment in which the gene sits. Well, the literal environment around our cells is what? Anyone? What's the environment, the literal physical environment around our cells? Anyone? Biology 101. Anyone? Blood. Right? Our cells sit in our bloodstream. The blood is the literal environment that our cells sit in. Well, what's flowing through our blood? Oxygen, absolutely. But that's going to be true for everyone. You breathe, you've got oxygen. What's the stuff we have control over that's flowing through our blood? I'm sorry?
DNA, mitochondria.
That's in the cell. So that's impacting all of the different workings inside the cell, absolutely. The bloodstream that the cell sits in, that gets filled with what? What we eat, absolutely. The food we eat.
How we feel.
How we feel. Yes. Yes. So here's what's really exciting is hormones flow through the bloodstream. And when most of us think of hormones, we tend to just think of estrogen and testosterone. We tend to just think sort of sex. But when you're stressed, cortisol, what we call adrenaline, well, that's a hormone that flows through your bloodstream. And there's a lot more to it than that, but this is on the very, very, very most basic. We also now know that there are receptors on cells in the body, below the neck, in the immune system, that speak to neurotransmitters from the brain. Now this is exciting science, because we used to think that neurotransmitters stayed only in the brain, that you had hormones in the body, neurotransmitters in the brain. We now know, actually, it seems that neurotransmitters are interacting with, communicating with cells that are far below the neck. So there is this intimate and intricate communication. And so the environment that your cells sit in is made up of what you eat, how you feel. Things like a hug, for example, or aggression. So both ends of the spectrum flood our bodies with chemicals, flood our bodies with hormones. A hug floods our bodies with certain hormones, certain chemicals. Great aggression. Who do you think you are? How dare you? Get out of my space in line. Get out of my parking spot. That was floods our body with different hormones. Each of those is interacting with our cells in a very different way. And so we have control over that. We have control over the expression of the DNA, of the genes. And that's what the science of epigenetics is about, is the scientific basis of how this works. Now, of course, the sages and the saints, thousands of years ago, long before anyone ever had a microscope with a slide that they could stick a drop of blood on and look at it, long before any of that, the saints told us, watch your thoughts. Watch your emotions. Creates your future. Well, if our genes created our future, why bother watching your thoughts? So thousands of years ago they knew, those thoughts, they create the future. So the karma of your genes is past karma. Can't change them. But the karma of how those genes get expressed, which ones get expressed, how they get expressed, well, you're creating that now.
Like we talk about energies, there are negative energies and positive energies. And there are they're created sometimes by our thoughts and sometimes by people around you in the society. And there are people in your social circle, in your neighborhood, in your family, which really give a push to those negative energies.
Mm-hmm.
So how to, you say, okay, no, you know negative energy is bad, but how to put that or maybe convert that into a positive thing, so that it helps
Yes.
your thought process, and it calms your mind.
Great. I'm going to start with that tomorrow.
Oh, I will be there. I'll just then see it on your thing.
So, okay, if you won't be here tomorrow, then we'll do it shortly tonight, and then we can take it up more. Sure. Every situation in our life is an opportunity for us. We tend to move through the world as victims of our situations. So this person is very negative, I'm a victim of it. But instead of seeing it like that, and then of course we try to figure out how can I get out of it. Some situations we can get out of. A negative colleague, for example, you can change jobs or just ask to have your desk put in a different, part of the office, depending on your situation. A negative neighbor, maybe you could even go as far as moving. Negative family members, of course, become much more difficult, especially if you're under one roof with them. But in all of these circumstances, we feel very much like the victim. Either a victim with power to do something about it, or a victim without any power to do something about it. But in all of these cases, there are actually opportunities for us. Because what that person is doing is their negativity. Whether I take it in is up to me. Now, we are energetic beings, and what that means is that someone's energy is going to impact me. You cannot deny that, and there's no point even trying to be absolutely unimpacted. We are energetic beings. The same way that if someone shouts, simply the energetic impact of the sound waves, even if they're not shouting at you, is going to create an impact in the body. But the question becomes, what's my opportunity here? How can I transform that negative energy in me? I may not be able to transform that person, but how can I transform it in me? And if we simply develop the habit of leaving situations that feel negative, we never learn this ability. Yucky neighbor, we move. Yucky colleague, quit my job or get a desk someplace else. Yucky, if I do that all the time, I never develop this ability to transform it. And that's a very, very powerful practice, is how to take that which comes in as negative and transform it in me into positive. And the way to do that is through compassion. Everyone who is negative because they are suffering. If someone were not suffering, they would not be negative. This is why people who are happy are so much nicer to be around than people who are miserable. If someone is happy, or if someone has just fallen in love, even if you're not the person they fell in love with, they're nice to be around. Because in general, they're nice people. They've got good energy. People who are miserable, even if it's not you they're angry at, nonetheless, that energy is not nice. And so the way that we transform that within us is through generating compassion within ourselves. Compassion for the being who is suffering. And as that comes in, literally develop a visual imagery of, did you ever see Superman, the Superman movies? Okay. So, you know how he would literally go into the phone booth and he'd go in as Clark Kent, right? And kind of, there were the spinning doors and come out as Superman, right? So, envision something literally like that. This rotating door of energy. So it comes in negative. And the rotating door of you turns it into compassion. And in order to feel compassion, you have to feel love. Not necessarily love for the person. If you can, great, but it's more difficult. But you simply have to feel love in general. Love for creation, love for humanity, love in general. When you are in a loving state of mind, then you're able to experience compassion for other people. When you're not in a loving state of mind, then whatever other people do, you become the victim. So realize, if I generate love within me, I'm going to be able to get this kind of revolving door thing going. Of negativity comes in and compassion goes out. And another very, very beautiful and very deep technique is to realize that the you who's getting impacted by that negativity is the ego you. But when you realize that you is actually this infinite consciousness, spaciousness, where is it going to go? Visualize the inner aspect of yourself as just space. As just energy. So as it comes in, it almost just kind of goes, like there's nothing for it to grab onto. A meteor flowing through space. It's over in a second. It only becomes a problem when it crashes into a planet. But if there's just space and there's no planet of ego in there that energy is going to crash into and create a problem. It's a deeper and more difficult process, but it's a very, very beautiful spiritual experience of, can you just experience spaciousness? Just an experience of spaciousness, that it's not, there's no me in here. Yes, there's a physical container, but there's no place that you could say, yeah, that's me. Oh yeah, no, me was over here. No, me was here. No, me was here. There isn't any actual part of me here. There's this physical container and spaciousness. And so when the energy comes in, where is it going to land? Nowhere. And it just kind of dissolves. Burns up in the atmosphere the same way a meteor does if it doesn't hit a planet. And so that's another very, very deep and beautiful practice to give yourself, is work with just your own inner spaciousness. And work with having compassion for them. 2 different practices. Both very, very beneficial in different ways. And the last piece is work on your own energy. Because most of us move through the world, I always say, as energetic receivers, but we're also energetic transmitters. And so if somebody is giving you negativity, rather than in that moment identifying as the receiver of that energy, identify as the transmitter of love. Because we're always doing both anyway. We're always receiving, we're always transmitting. But when something is negative, we tend to over-identify always as the receiver. Instead of that, again, just envision, I love visual imagery. Just envision literally a switch inside you that says, receiver, off, transmitter, on. And just start transmitting. And again, it may not impact them, but it'll create around you. Do you know the way wetsuits work? You know when people go in the ocean and they wear a wetsuit. Do you know how wetsuits work? Does anyone know how wetsuits work?
Charging the body.
I'm sorry?
It charges the body.
It charges the body. Well, it keeps it warm, but how does a wetsuit keep the body warm? Does anyone know?
Not keeping the water to go.
By preventing the water from going in. So that's what everyone thinks.
Create that as a barrier.
I'm sorry?
Create the love that you transmit as a barrier
Yes.
for the negative energy.
Exactly. But here's why I like the wetsuit metaphor. Here's actually how wetsuits work. What you've described is what they call a dry suit. And there are such things that literally keep all the water out. Here's how a wetsuit works. It actually lets in a tiny, tiny layer of water that our body heat warms up very quickly. And it keeps out all the rest of the water. So it lets in this tiny little layer of water. So when you peel off a wetsuit, you're not dry, you're wet. It lets in this tiny layer of water that our body heat warms up. And so in the cold ocean, we are warm. Because we're literally surrounded by this very thin layer of warm water that our body heat has warmed up. We're not warming the ocean, but at least it's keeping us warm in the ocean. So in the same way, when you transmit love, don't expect that you're going to necessarily be able to transmit so much that you're going to warm the ocean. But just transmit enough that the layer around you, the energetic experience you are living in, is full of love. Envision that you've got sort of a love wetsuit. And that you're transmitting love into that. And so you're moving through the world with love. As you get stronger and deeper in your practice, maybe you want to cut some holes in your wetsuit and allow the love to start to try to impact others. But in the beginning, just use it to protect yourself. Use it to keep yourself in that layer of love so that negativity can't impact you.
I really appreciate because she's my wife. She's suffering from this problem for the last so many years. She has not answered properly. Now today I think, has got the answer.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So it is not transferred to me now.
Wonderful. आपका भी जिम्मेदारी होगी उसमें.
Yes.
Wonderful. Have a beautiful, beautiful night, and we'll see you, or most of you at least, tomorrow.